40 months, $2,000, and 7 heads.
Beg your pardon?
7.
8?
No, 7.
7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7.
And after all that, we unbox it and Mrs. X says, wow, she's attractive. As the Extreme channel is pushing towards 50,000 subscribers, these are just a few of the statues we are giving away on the journey there. If you want to know how to win one, stay tuned for later in the video. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in, which is arguably one of my most long-awaited statues. This is a custom Omega Red statue that I ordered 40 months ago. Yes, over 3 years ago, and he is finally here on the table, and boy, do we have a lot to talk about. Anyway, we're going to do an in-depth review on this guy. We're going to talk all about him, but before we dive into this statue specifically, let's chat about Omega Red a little bit. So Omega Red was always a favorite of mine growing up for a multitude of reasons. Not only some of the video games that are out there, especially some of the Versus games. Omega Red! Know what I'm talking about? But I was a big fan of Wolverine, so I had a number of comics where he faced off against Omega Red. So Omega Red's kind of an interesting cat. Omega Red was a mutant, but then he had a lot of enhancements done to him. Now Omega Red, who is from Mother Russia, was a mutant, mainly with 2 mutant abilities. The first is he actually releases a pheromone called Death Spore. Now this pheromone is something he releases that actually kills people and mutants. It kind of reminds me of my youngest son's farts. His second mutant ability is actually he has super healing ability. Nowhere near what Wolverine has, but still pretty strong. Now in the timeline of Marvel Comics, Mother Russia was competing with the US. And the US came out with specifically one big program called the Super Soldier Program, or Steve Rogers' Captain America. And Mother Russia was doing a lot of different things, including the work they did with Bucky Barnes, who as you know is the Winter Soldier, the Red Room, and they took Omega Red and they modified him. They did a number of different things, including some implants. Now the biggest modification is right here, these tentacles. What these are essentially are an artificial or poor man's version of adamantium. And just like adamantium, they have a lot of the same properties. They're super strong, they're actually poisonous to the host, and that's what most of Omega Red's story honestly is in Marvel Comics, is trying to find a way to counteract that poison that the tentacles are actually doing to him. Now again, I want to emphasize they're nowhere near what adamantium is, but they're kind of the second closest thing that can be substituted and that can be man-made. Omega Red, believe it or not, is not that popular of a character, and there were actually rumors that he was going to launch in the most recent Falcon and Winter Soldier series in Disney+, but we didn't see him. Now I think he would be fantastic to be introduced into the MCU, or just really revived in Marvel Comics, because despite the fact he's not super popular, he is such an amazing and badass character and hard to kill. Besides some of the superpowers we talked about, the mutant abilities, he's also super strong, super agile, and just in general, a really big foe for anybody, no matter who he's taking on, whether it's the X-Men or some of the other Marvel heroes of the day. But enough of that, let's dive into this statue, and it is simply amazing. So as we dive into this piece, I want to remind you, there's not a lot of Omega Red statues, because like I said, despite the fact he's such a badass character, he's really not that popular, and he's mostly associated with being an enemy of the X-Men or with Wolverine, although he's done a lot of crossovers with tons of other mutants, including Black Widow and many more. And from a statue perspective, there's not really a lot either. Recently, XM Studios actually came out with this piece, which I actually own. You can check out the review right here. Now I'm going to do what we call an Extrumble or an Extreme Rumble, which is a statue comparison between these two statues, so make sure to keep your eye out for that. But first, let's start with this guy, and we're going to dive in with concept of this piece. Now they've done a number of things here, and some of it, as usual, will revolve around the design, which we'll talk about right after this, but we'll start with concept. So first, on this base here, they have almost like a genetic type chamber, and I love this. I love the fact that there's no museum or sub-base underneath it, and there are a ton of stuff going on. We don't know if this is a chamber that he broke out of, where they did the modifications to him. Maybe he's back looking for a way to get the poison out of his system. And there's tons of circuitry and gears, and as you see, it's completely frosted over. There are actually icicles all over the back, which you're going to see during paint and sculpt, and he is on top of it very savage. We don't know if he destroyed this or if it was destroyed when he arrived, but you see him lunging over on top, He has his tentacles coming out of him, and there's a number of tentacle switch outs. There's hand switch outs, there's shoulder switch outs. Obviously, like we talked about, there's tons of portrait switch outs. So we can presume that like he either destroyed this and he's here pissed off, maybe in a fit of rage, or maybe he's facing off against another enemy. He's kind of hunching over, which is more of a design thing we'll talk about. But you see some snow and ice on his boots, which all this cold is very indicative of Mother Russia, as it is a colder climate in the world. And he just looks fierce. I love the representation of him. This piece shows a lot of presence, especially for the scale, which we'll also talk about during design. I love the fact it shows the badassery of Omega Red. I feel like it shows a lot of his origins. So I think it's really well done. I wouldn't want him standing up fully because that would be a huge issue with the height of the piece for sure. But I think overall the concept is definitely a solid 4 out of 5, almost a 5 out of 5 on this. Very impressive. Now with the design, there's a lot of impressive things as well, and a few imperfect things we're going to talk about. But let's start with the unboxing and assembly. It was 2 very large boxes you can see right here in the standard custom black foam. Now I have to let you know this was packed amazingly well. There was no damages or broken parts. So this first box, this layer mainly had a lot of the heads and a few of the additional pieces that we're going to put on Omega Red in the base. Another layer was just the tentacles, and they were all wrapped extremely well. Now while this was packed really well, I still fear if I ever have to ship it somewhere else where I don't plan to. Now here's the last box and the last layer. You can see Omega Red, the base, and a few other pieces. Alright, so first thing I want to talk about is scale. Now scale is how big is this in comparison to a real life version. Now typically I get statues that are either 1/4 or 1/3 scale. 1/3 is actually bigger. Go ahead and check, I'm right. Now because I ordered this so long ago, I didn't remember what scale it is. And as you guys know, I hate to see work in progress photos. I don't like to know anything except updates of when it's going to arrive, and then finally when I open it up on the table, I can see it in all its glory. So I didn't know if it was 1/3 or 1/4, I couldn't remember. So I actually started doing some math. Omega Red is 6 feet 11 inches tall, or right at 83 inches or so. The problem with this statue is he's hunched over. Now if he's 83 inches, that means 1/4 scale, he should be about 21 inches or so. Granted, it's hard to tell with him hunched over, but Omega Red from his foot to his hunched over top is right at about 17 or 18 inches. However, if he was fully standing up, I think he'd be bigger than that. So clearly, it is not 1/4 scale. 1/3 scale would insinuate he's 28 inches. Which, as you can see, it goes way up there. You can't even see the tip.
That's what she said.
And I think if he was standing straight up, you wouldn't even see the top of that. So clearly, it is not 1/3 scale either. Clearly, it is not 1/4 scale. I feel like I'm having an argument with the guy from Princess Bride. Now for scale-wise, here is a picture of his portrait, which that's a little bit easier to tell scale, next to some other traditional portraits, some custom ones and a licensed. And honestly, I prefer that scale because that's what most of my custom X-Men line is, right in between 1/3 and 1/4. If you want to see what he looks like in the collection, make sure to check out the Extreme Channel Instagram, Facebook page, and TikTok. So I think it's somewhere in between. But let's get dimensions on the full piece. The highest point is just under the ponytail, just under 24 inches, or over 24 inches, excuse me. The widest point of the base is about 15 inches, and the deepest part of the base is about 17 inches, give or take. Now, he has so many different switch outs, some of that can change the size of the statue a little bit. But let's start looking at all those switch outs, and we'll look at the basic ones first. On his shoulders, you can do one of two things. You can do shoulder pads like this, or you can do what I would almost call implants. Sorry, we need to be PC. His professional augmentations. His hands, you can do two options. An open palm on both hands, his left and right, or a closed fist, both on left and right. His tentacles, there are 11 different tentacles. So you can pretty much do tons of different combinations. Here's just some different shots for you. Some are longer, some are shorter, some wrap around, some go straight out. And honestly, other than taking these pictures, I haven't tried that many different combinations. But it's more than enough in my opinion. My favorite is the one with the skull, and because this is kind of an adamantium color, I always envision this as Wolverine's portrait. Now last, let's look at his portraits, all 7 of them. First, here he is with kind of a grimace on his face. And what's interesting is there's a few other ones with a grimace as well. Here's another one with a grimace, but he has claw marks through him. And I do like that, because Wolverine, in my opinion, is kind of the main antagonist against him. Here is one where he is actually grimacing his teeth. And he has some implants on the side of his face. A little bit of an Elvis lip. And then another very similar one where the implants are bigger and he loses the Elvis lip. And he has a little bit of an overbite or even bite compared to the underbite in the last one. Here is another one where he has an implant on one side and his old mutton chops on the other. I like symmetrical stuff, so this will definitely not be one for me. Here's another one where he has a ponytail. You can see more of his implants because his hair is braided up. And then also the Omega Red symbol or brand on his face and the Wolverine scars. And then here is one with his mouth open, screaming in rage. Now you saw the assembly. A few notes on design. Some of the things are loose. Not so loose that they'll fall out. You can move it back and forth like this, no problem. Some of the heads have a decent amount of give to them. In the factory, actually, you can tell, after the fact right here, they glued more magnets on there because I'm guessing the magnets they casted in there weren't strong enough to hold. So half of them have that. Also, the tentacles just use friction. There's no magnets on those. They're very light, but you just want to be a little bit careful. And same thing with the arms. The arms are magnetized, but they are a little bit loose, so you just want to be really careful with everything. I would definitely recommend disassembling this when you move it. So recently, I did a review on XM Studios' Samurai Nightwing, this piece right here. And I brought up the question, are too many switch outs bad? Well, I think this one begs the question too. 7 different portraits, it's too many. I do understand the methodology behind it. There's so many different people you want to please. Now for me, at least 3, if not 4 of these are going back in the box. And honestly, probably at least 6 of the tentacles are going back in the box as well. So it's almost too many. So design's not perfect. Overall, I think it's a 4 out of 5. It's still done very well. No seam lines. And everything works good. Now let's dive into the paint and sculpt. And this is where it shines. It's done fabulously. Kind of a spoiler. But let's take a look, and I'll also do some close-ups of each head for you guys. So let's kick it off with the portraits, and it's interesting with these. There are so many subtle details that are different in each one, and I'm probably going to miss a few because I know this commissioner is all about the details, but let's start with the hair. So all very similar. There is a little bit of directionality difference in each one, but you have this nice white shading interlaced with those blonde Goldilocks, and look at the different strands and how they're looping over each other. Very full hair, done fantastic. We'll not focus as much on the hair. Most of them, like I said, have that Omega Red headband, and I like how it's that darker purple color. Still has the Omega symbol on it. Skin tone, I think, is fantastic in all of them. It's got this great blue shading that's very subtle. You can't really see it in the other areas that aren't around the eyes. These beady red eyes. Great job on the eyebrows. A lot of detail in there. I like the fact that you can still see strands. Now on Omega Red, here his lips are pursed. These light pink lips. Look fantastic. There's the Wolverine scar. And then the circuitry on this is unbelievable. You're going to see some on Omega Red himself. Such crazy detail. So then here, you know, you can tell the hair going in a little bit different direction, so I like how it's always different things going on. A lot of the same comments, but obviously his mouth sculpted very different. You see the teeth in here. I like how they're not pearly whites. You see a lot of yellow staining. The tongue in here, I like how they went with more of a purple and blue. You know, Omega Red always has that cold aspect to him. So really well done. The jawline looks great. The nose, fantastic job. Again, hair kind of flowing in a different way on this one. Here he has the bigger circuitry, no Wolverine scar. That's the biggest difference between this and the first one we looked at. And again, so much detail on those circuits or implants. Here's one where even more darkness around his eyes. I like how it's a little bit different. And then that little Elvis curl up there. And like I said, subtle difference. Here he kind of has an underbite. I like the coloring in the gums. Smaller circuitry implants on the side. Again, different directionality in the hair. Hard to do, make sure I don't break it. I had to sneeze. So here, a few different things going on. We didn't really talk about the overlapping hair on the headband, but that's evident on each one, but it's different on each one. Like I said, subtle differences in the hair. Here, just like the last one, he's baring his teeth, but there is no underbite. They're kind of even, larger circuitry chips on the side, and a lot more of that blue-black around the eyes, and a little bit of what I would call an Elvis eye. His eyebrow is tilted up. So just all these subtle differences, which as we talked about, does that make it good or bad? Then here is the one with the mutton chops. Again, I like symmetry, so for that reason, I'm not a fan of this one. But you see the eyebrows also different color. And there's probably some story behind this. I'm sure there is. But cool option though. I could definitely see a lot of people liking this, and the hair flowing a little bit different. And then the last one, I hate the ponytail on this, and I love the fact that there's a little skull holding it together, but the braids, I hate those braids. They did a fantastic job on the detail of them though. And then the circuitry in here too, look at that. Fantastic job. The Wolverine scar, the Omega Red symbol on the top there. The detail on this is impeccable, and you're going to see a lot of that in the statue as well. All right, on the base here, I love the snow effect, and I think that snow and frost and ice can be a huge miss or a huge hit, and this is definitely a huge hit. It looks like it's really frozen. I love this frost effect and how in different areas it's a little more intense. And then look at these icicles. They look like real icicles. Down here. So just phenomenal job, and I think that's a combination of both paint and sculpt. There's even a little bit of yellowing. And on these pipes here, you can see the copper tone underneath it, underneath this tube. This looks like it's really like cryogenically frozen, and you can still see all the detail on the circuitry on here. Very, very cool, very, very well done. I like how this piece of metal is kind of coming out. And then right here, the star, and then, you know, signifying his origins right here, like we talked about, the Omega and the O1. But so much detail, you could just look at this for hours. Let's talk about the tentacles. So here you have a problem. You want to make them metallic, like traditionally people like metal on Wolverine's claws. But if they did that with this, it just wouldn't work due to the physics of it, of how much it would weigh, how much they come out here. So I think they did a really nice job with the paint on this to give it kind of that metallic feel. And it's not too shiny. This would actually be my spot on preference. You can see each of the segments here moving up. So really well done job on these tentacles. Very impressed. Here's a close-up of the head that we talked about. Another big Omega symbol back here on the base we really didn't look at. Then look at his shoes. So they've got this slight frost line on them, and you can see the red underneath. So I like how it tells that same consecutive story. Really well done. This pattern in his suit, kind of a triangle texture board pattern, and then you have some holes on this darker red padded material right here. Really impressive, all the detail. Even his bat utility pack here. Look at the tiny micro detail on the belt, the latches. His anatomy looks great. I like the fact that, you know, Omega Red is a pretty tough, pretty bulky guy, but he doesn't look like he's roided out here. They did a really nice job with that, how the suit kind of forms to his body. I think the anatomy on the back is pretty accurate. If someone doesn't have much back fat, like Dunks, great job. I love the seams on here. Now, one thing we didn't talk about, you have to display this at least at eye level or higher to make it make sense. We talked about more of the detail of these implants. Now what I've done is, this is typically, as you saw earlier, where the shoulder pad could go. So I've done both to kind of show you here. Some almost like chainmail right there on his sleeves. So much different stuff you'd find if you looked on here. As we talked about the anatomy, great job even on his biceps. You see the blue veins running underneath. And then where the tentacles come out, there's a little bit of that looseness I talked about. You can see, pretty minor. His gloves, these great padding in his gloves. And I like the fact that they use this darker red color here compared to his suit, which is even different than this right here, this inner seam area. You can't see a lot of his torso just because the way he's bent over. It's hard to even try and give me a shot for you guys. So I think, like I said, this commissioner is really about the detail and perfections. With the paint and sculpt, it's clear in the final product because it nailed it perfectly. This is one of those statues that you can continue to look at and find new cool details you didn't know were there. All right, so paint, we're going to start with that. I think paint's phenomenal. I can't find an area that I'd improve. I love a lot of the little subtle stuff. I think the paint is a 5 out of 5. As I said, fantastic snow effect. I love everything about it. Sculpt, incredibly well done. I love Omega Red. One part when we talked about here, this does look a little bit longer, but doing the measuring, everything is perfect. So I think the sculpt, I think I'm going to have to give the sculpt a 5 out of 5 as well. Very impressive. Value. So I said at the beginning, $2,000. I exaggerated a little bit. It was $1,600 plus shipping was $2 or $3. I think shipping was $300, and it did take quite a while to get here. So you're almost $2,000 all in. The edition size is in the 60s, if I recall correctly. So pretty low edition size. Omega Red's not a really highly sought after character. However, the paint and sculpt are 5 out of 5 on this. I could definitely get my money back. There's no question about that. I don't know how high this will go in status. I think if the MCU introduces Omega Red, the value of this will shoot through the roof, possibly even a 5 out of 5. I could definitely see it go up 50% in price. But I think for now, without letting any hints out about the Extremble that I haven't filmed yet, I think the value is pretty high. I think it's even better than average. I could not only get my money back, but I could probably make a profit. So I think the value is a 4 out of 5, which I'm very hesitant to say about a piece that costs so much money. Now, does this have the X factor? Is this a 5 out of 5 statue? So this isn't a cumulative score. It's just what do I think overall? Now, Omega Red, me having a lot of ties to him definitely helps. The paint and sculpt being amazing obviously helps. This is an amazing statue. I definitely think it'll be in the running of the year for Custom Statue of the Year. I don't know if that's a real award, but I just kind of made it up. I definitely give this piece a 5 out of 5. 40 months is a very, very long wait. Xmen is one of the final displays I'll ever have, so I'm not worried about that. He's going to go fantastic with them. To win one of these statues, all you have to do is make sure you've liked this video, you've subscribed to the channel, you've hit that bell notification, and then just drop a comment below. Every 5,000 subscriber milestone, we are going to do a random drawing and pick a random comment and give one of these statues away, plus some additional ones I'm not showing right now. The more videos you comment on, the higher your chances are to win. So is he better than XM Studios? Well, if you want to find out, stay tuned for that video. Hit that picture of me below to subscribe, hit that bell notification. In the meantime, to enter into that contest, drop me a like, leave me a comment on your way out. Talk to you guys very soon. Take care.